KL Productions presents
The 5 P's. Prior planning prevents poor performance. The lesson Xavier never forgot. By Ryan C. Sanders. It was the year 2024, and Xavier was a bright 12-year-old middle school student who loved football, video games, and hanging out with his friends. He especially loved his new VR headset, which seemed to open up an entire world where he could play and explore without leaving his room. But sometimes he got so caught up in the game that he forgot about everything else. His chores, his homework, and even important family responsibilities. Xavier's stepdad, Mr. Ryan, was a man of principles. He often reminded Xavier of a phrase that he had been told since he was a child. It has been passed down through the generations. Prior planning prevents poor performance. Xavier had heard it many times before. It was practically his dad's motto. And though it sometimes annoyed him, he couldn't deny that Mr. Ryan was always well prepared for most things. One crisp fall afternoon, just as the leaves started turning orange and red, Xavier was in his room with his VR headset on, fully immersed in a game where he was a knight defending a castle. He was so engrossed in the action that he didn't hear his mom, Janella, calling from the downstairs. "Xavier, it's time to take out the trash," she called, her voice echoing through the hallway. But in his virtual world, Xavier was too busy fighting off dragons and didn't notice the time slipping away. By the time he finished, he quickly glanced at the clock and realized it was almost time for the school football game. His best friend Silas was playing, and Xavier had been looking forward, cheering him on all week. Just as he rushed down the stairs to grab his jacket, he was met by Mr. Ryan, standing at the door, arms folded, with a knowing look in his face. Behind him, the trash bag still sat in the kitchen, untouched. "Xavier, did you take out the trash like your mom asked you?" Mr. Ryan asked, his tone calm but firm. Xavier froze. He had completely forgotten. He fumbled for an excuse, but before he could get a word out, Mr. Ryan raised his hand gently and said, "Remember what I always tell you, son. Prior planning prevents poor performance." Xavier sighed. He knew his stepdad was right. He hadn't planned his afternoon well, and now it was going to cost him. "But Dad," Xavier protested, "I just lost track of time. I was going to do it, but I got caught up in my game." Mr. Ryan knelt down to Xavier's level and looked him in his eye. "I know you didn't mean to forget, Xavier, but when you don't plan ahead, these things happen. If you had made the decision to take care of your chores first, you'd be on your way to the game right now. It's not just about the trash. It's about preparing yourself for any and everything life throws at you." Janella, who was listening from the kitchen, nodded in agreement. Though a small smile crossed her face, she understood her husband's wisdom. Even if she sometimes thought he could be a bit stern about it, still she admired how he always had Xavier's best interest at heart. "Your dad's right," Xavier said, adding, walking over, "Sometimes we have to take care of the not-so-fun stuff first, so we can enjoy the fun things later." Xavier felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He knew they were both right. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have listened." Mr. Ryan smiled warmly and patted him on the shoulder. "It's okay, son. You're learning. But next time, think ahead, plan out your day, and make sure you've got your responsibilities covered before you dive into your games or anything else. That's how you set yourself up for success." With that, Xavier quickly grabbed the trash, ran outside, and tossed it into the bin. But by the time he finished, it was too late to catch his ride to the football game. But he didn't sulk. Instead, he decided to use the time to catch up with some schoolwork he had been putting off. His dad's words stuck with him. Prior planning prevents poor performance. Over the next few weeks, Xavier started applying that lesson in small ways. He set reminders on his phone for his chores, laid out clothes for his school the night before, and even started packing his lunch in the evenings so he wouldn't have to rush in the mornings. Slowly but surely, things began to change. One morning, while sitting at the kitchen table, Mr. Ryan noticed Xavier with a small checklist in his hand, ticking off the things he had already done for the day. "You've got your day all planned out, I see," Mr. Ryan said with a proud smile. Xavier grinned back. "Yep, I figured if I get everything done early, I have more time for the fun stuff later." Mr. Ryan's heart swelled with joy. "That's my boy," he said. "Remember, this isn't just about chores, Xavier. It's about life. When you plan ahead and think about what's need to be done, you're setting yourself up for success. Not just now, but everything you do." Years passed, and Xavier continued to listen to his stepdad's motto. By the time he reached high school, he had become the captain of the football team, not just because he was a great player, but because his teammates respected his leadership and preparation. He was a kind of a guy that, showed up super early for practice, studied the game, and always made sure everything was in place before the big games. When it came time for college applications, Xavier wasn't scrambling like many of his friends. He had planned ahead, worked hard in school, and had all his documents ready to go. His acceptance letter to a top university came in the mail, and as he held it in his hands, he couldn't help but think back to all the times Mr. Ryan had reminded him of those 5 words: prior planning prevents poor performance. At his high school graduation, Xavier stood proudly in his cap and gown. Janella and Mr. Ryan and family members sat in the audience, beaming with pride. As Xavier delivered his valedictorian speech, he made sure to mention the lessons that had shaped his journey. "I want to thank my parents, especially my dad, for always reminding me to plan ahead," Xavier said, his voice full of gratitude. "It's simply a lesson, but it's made all the difference in my life. Prior planning really does prevent poor performance." The audience clapped, but no one clapped louder than Mr. Ryan as he wiped a tear from his eye. He knew that Xavier had not only learned the lesson, but he had lived it. And that, more than anything else, was the true mark of success.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe.